and now I'm back from outer space. I just came in to find you here with that sad look upon your face, because you've missed me. I know you have. You know why? Because Candace has been slack and has been sporadically uploading videos, or in this case, not uploading videos, because I've been busy elsewhere. I know, and I'm sorry for that. I want to offer a valid excuse, but I can't. I mean, I've been off doing other things. I'll explain those other things later, but for now, we're going to do a book review. Okay, so let's get into it. Hi, my little babies. How are you doing? Thank you for joining me for another episode of What the Smut Book Reviews. like the way I dragged that out. Kind of creepy. Hi, my name is Candace. Welcome to another episode of What the Smut Book Reviews. In case you're new here, I am a very demure, very chill individual. I would really love for you to stick around. We do book reviews here. We don't ever yell. I never lose control of my feelings or emotions. Can't even say it with a straight face. Hi. Run for your life, okay? That's all I can say. Run for your life. If you're not afraid of spazzy, borderline psychotic behavior, right here, you came to the right place. Hi, I'm Candace. I'm your host. Thank you for joining me for another episode. In today's video, we are going to be reviewing a book. Yes, we are. We are actually here to review, and I'm super hyped about this one, by the way, because you know me, queen of book 2. I liked book 1. I said it in the review for book 1. I liked it. I really did. Oh God. However, as I've pointed out in previous videos, I don't know what's wrong with my brain, but for some reason, I tend to always like book 1 in a series the least. I never dislike it. I just don't like it the most. It's never my favorite. Okay? I want to point that out for the record. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's not my favorite. Okay? This book that we're getting ready to review was my favorite. And I say that, I can say that because it was on this series, if you can call it that, was literally like a duet. There's only 2 books in the series. Yes, there is like a branch off series that has a bunch of books in it, and characters from these 2 books are in those books. So can you tie this series to another series? Sure. But for the purpose of what Amazon tells me, there's only 2 books in this series. So let's get into it, shall we? In today's video, kiddos, we will be reviewing book 2 in Carian Cole's All Torn Up series, and it is called Tide. Okay, this book and the first book in the series, which is called Torn, are both free to read with Kindle Unlimited. Okay, free to read with KU. If you want to purchase this book, you can do so for the price of $4.99. If you want this beautiful trade paperback that I'm holding in my hands right here, this thick boy, look at that spine. Look at that. If you want this gorgeous trade paperback, you can get it for the price of $17.99. I don't know if I want to say that that's a little bit pricey. Maybe lately I've just been finding like trade paperbacks listed for like $15.99, $13.99. So maybe to me, $17.99 feels a little bit pricey, but in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not, because if I think to myself like, well, Penelope Douglas's Devil's Night series, those books were like fucking $18, $20 a piece. So, yeah, it's probably about the same. So, Candace, you're imagining things. Anyways, this book is well worth the $17.99 that I paid for it because I fucking had to have it. I had to have it. Before I was even a quarter of the way through with this audiobook, I had already purchased the trade paperback and it was on the way to my house. The story. Okay. There were two things that I want to point out about the story that were a little bit funky to me, but I'm going to do so at the end of the review because I don't want to taint the review for you. They weren't bad things. They were weird to me in terms of like something you don't see every day with a romance novel. But I understand the reason why she did it. It just at the time, it felt weird. And I'll point them out at the end. Okay. However, the story in this book, oh my God. The main characters, the way they met, their story, the way they fall in love. Just the, okay. Anyway, let's get into the details of the book. Oh, also, before we move on, because you know I have to, of course I do. Of course I do. Oh my God, I love that. Look at this. Look at the end. Believe in your fairy tale. Oh, fuck. Bitch, I love you. I love you, girl. I don't want to count the, where are you? Okay. I don't want to count the bonus scene because the bonus scene literally made me cry hysterically. Okay. According to Amazon, this book has 426 pages. The actual book itself has 413 pages. You remember like last time, I don't think I had the book in hand to be able to be like, Amazon, you lying bitch. Well, guess what? Now I do. And guess what else? Amazon, you a lying bitch. Got him. Got him. Okay. So anyways, moving on. This book is also available in audio. I listened to this book in audio. The narrators for this book were Chez Magnifique. Is that how you say that? Oh my God. They were so good. The narrators for this book. The guy who voiced Tyler. I couldn't wait for his chapters to come. Like his next, I was drooling in my mouth. Like the saliva was pooling up in my mouth while waiting for the next chapter from his POV. I was literally like, his voice was, oh God, oh my God. Anyways. Do I do my research to find out the names of these narrators? No, I don't. So I don't know who it is. I'm going to look it up though. Trust me, I will. Because it was God. Yes. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Let's read the blurb really quick and then we'll break down and then you guys can go and you'll be free of me for the rest of the day. Until next week. Until next week. And then I'll be back. I'll be back. I could never do that. I don't know why. Okay, so the blurb for this one says, two hearts tied together by hope and tragedy, an unexpected smile, a touch on scarred flesh, a kiss on waiting lips, an undeniable love that overcomes all doubt. My childhood and innocence were stolen when I was kidnapped at 5 years old and held captive for 11 years. Now, at 18 years old, I don't know what love, happiness, or hope feels like anymore. I'm numb and lost, clinging to a childhood fairy tale of a happily ever after with the prince I hoped would someday save me. I had no idea my prince would come in the form of a scarred recluse covered in tattoos, who won't or can't speak a word. The moment our eyes met, I knew he was the one, my prince, the one I knew would save me. He's possibly as lost in society as I am, scarred just as much on the inside as the outside, just like me. Haunted by his tragic past, he's sentenced himself to a lifetime of loneliness. He saved my life that day he found me in the woods, and although he doesn't speak or smile, I can't stop thinking about him. I ache to hear his voice and see him smile, and I want nothing more than to be the one to break through his walls. Together, we found love, happiness, and a closeness that once felt impossible to have. But can I save him from himself and the twisted past that ties us together? The two main characters for this book are Tyler and Holly. Okay. Tyler is a recluse. He lives in a cabin deep in the woods. The reason that Tyler is a recluse is because when he was a teenager, he was pushed into a bonfire at like a bonfire party. He had been drinking. He was pushed by some guy into a bonfire and burned severely all over his body, including half of his face. It cost him his girlfriend at the time, who couldn't stand to look at him because she was a shallow bitch. He became very bitter and very, very angry at the world. And he turned to drugs and alcohol to help numb him from the pain of being rejected by literally everyone around him. One night, that substance abuse caused him to get into an accident on his motorcycle, where he ran his motorcycle through a person's house. Through, like, they had giant windows all over the front of their house. And it was like their living room, and he ran his motorcycle through those windows. So not only now is he severely burned, but he's also severely cut up, including a giant shard of glass that was lodged in his throat, partially severing his vocal cords. So his voice, when he did finally recover, was extremely fucked up. So he does not, for the most part, he does not speak. He is selectively mute. Prior to that accident, and what caused him to go off on his own, was he got into a fight with his father about his substance abuse issues. Keep in mind, this is all happening while he's a teenager. His father, directly after the argument that happened in front of the house in the driveway, his father attempted to chase him down the driveway, like pleading with him not to leave on the bike because he was clearly drunk. And his father didn't want him to leave that way. His father had a heart attack and died in the driveway. And after his accident, his brother Tor told him about their father's death. And he has shouldered the burden of guilt for his father's death ever since. And he essentially internalized that and moved away from everyone and cut himself off from the world. And the only time he goes out is at night, where he rides his motorcycle with his face completely covered up by like a mask. He creates these very scary masks, like Halloween type masks, that he makes in his workshop, where he also makes like jewelry and things like out of metal that he creates for his brother's like shop business and things like to sell. It's like his contribution to the family business. His other contribution to the family business is he goes out and he helps look for strays. His mother owns an animal rescue, and so he helps her by going out and finding strays, or going and busting up dog fighting rings and that kind of thing. He does the dirty work of beating the shit out of people who fight animals and things like that. So one day he's out in the woods and he's walking and he's, you know, just doing whatever. And he hears this weird noise. What the fuck is that? What is that noise? It sounds like a dog barking, but like a garbled, weird version of a dog barking. And he can't figure out where it's coming from. He follows the noise. And eventually he realizes that the noise is coming from beneath him. He moves aside the brush and leaves and whatever, and he finds a wooden door that he lifts up, and there's a hole in the ground. And inside the hole is a girl, a malnourished, dirty, clothes have holes all in them. She's wearing a pair of oversized sweatpants and a giant oversized t-shirt, both covered in holes, both filthy. Clearly she's being starved to death, and she's holding a small white dog. The dog's vocal cords have been cut. He's been debarked, basically, so he can't fully bark. That's the noise he was hearing. He's like, oh shit. His first instinct is to call the police. He doesn't speak, but he tries anyway, and he calls 911. Eventually, he gets out enough to give them his location. That's it, and he hangs up. He tries to get the girl out of the hole. He gets her and the dog out of the hole eventually. She sees him as her savior. Inside the hole, in addition to her dog, she had a dirty old backpack. Well, clearly she's a teenager. She's not a little girl. What do you have a backpack for? So she sees him as like her savior. And after he's finally gotten her out of the hole, he glances down and sees that her face is full of terror. But she's not looking at him. She's looking past him at something else. He turns around and there's a man coming towards them with a giant knife. Clearly the dude that put her in the hole. He fights off the man with the knife. Eventually, he wrangles the knife away with the help of the girl who kicks the knife away. And then he strangles the man in front of her with his bare hands. He kills him. He thinks he's obviously traumatized the girl, but no. In actuality, he's endearing himself to her. And about that time, the dog starts to run off. She gives chase after the dog. He's chasing her. She starts yelling, get him, get him. About that time, the cops show up. And they think that she's yelling, get him, about Tyler. They think that he's the one that put her in the hole. he gets arrested. She gets taken to the hospital. Turns out she's now 16. She's a 16-year-old girl who was abducted while on her way to school, or on her way from school, I can't remember, with her friend. And she was abducted when she was 5 years old. And she's been missing. 5 years old? Yeah. She's been missing ever since she was 5. So she's been missing for 12 years. 12 years? 11 years. She's been missing for 11 years. So they take her to the hospital. They admit her. Her family comes. She has vague memories of her family. Her parents are pieces of shit. Straight up pieces of shit. They're very wealthy to-do people. They have money. They would rather buy off the problem than fix the problem. They're those kinds of people. She also has a brother, an older brother, who is a very nice guy and who takes a lot of time throughout the book to help her reacclimate to society as best he can, and, you know, offers to do anything to help her with whatever she needs. He has a fiance who's there to befriend her throughout the book. But her parents, especially her mother, is a piece of work. So eventually the issue with Tyler gets cleared up and he's released from jail, but not until after the rumor mills have started. And half the town thinks that he's the guy who put the little girl in the hole. So now he's even more of an outcast than he was before, and still living in the woods as a recluse. Okay. So let's just say, safe to say, Tyler doesn't go into town for anything, right? So as Holly sits in the hospital, it becomes apparent to her mom and dad that she has severe psychological issues. She clearly suffers from massive PTSD. She has anxiety. She's got big time problems. And these are not problems that are going to be solved by coming home and let me just give you as much love as possible, because they're not those kinds of people. After she was abducted, her mother went through a stage of serious depression until she got pregnant and had another daughter, and essentially, for lack of a better term, replaced her. Now that daughter is at home, and it's almost as if she doesn't want Holly to come home and taint her little sister with any of the bad negativity that surrounds her. So instead of bringing her home, she puts her in what essentially amounts to a mental institution. Granted, it's a high-priced mental institution, and it's not like she's in a straitjacket. She's getting good counseling, and she lives with a roommate, and she's well cared for, but she's still living in a facility instead of in a home. So she's now moved from the hospital into this facility where she's getting treatment for her PTSD and for, she's getting therapy and she's getting whatever. And the entire time she's there, she's waiting for Tyler. Because while she was in the hole, and while during the times that this man would take her out of the hole and take her to whatever the place was, the room or wherever, where he would essentially sexually assault her. All she had with her was the dog and her backpack. Inside the backpack were books on fairy tale books. They were fairy tales. And she would read them over and over and over. And so she became obsessed with the idea of happily ever after and princes and princesses and just having that fairy tale of a life. And it's what she held on to and what she retreated into to get away from the bad shit that was happening to her. So as she sits in, what is it, Maryfield or wherever, as she sits in this facility, she's waiting for her prince to find her because he's the one that saved her from the bad man. He killed the bad man for her. And the way it works in the fairy tales is she doesn't seek him out. He has to find her, or they have to meet under conditions that are destined by fate. If she goes looking for him, then it may ruin their happily ever after. Even though she's told by her roommate, whose name is Feather. I don't know if that's her real name, but that's what she goes by. Even though she's told by Feather a bunch of times, a simple Google search will find the guy that saved you. No, I don't want that. He has to find me. That's the way it works in the books. So she's sitting there and she's waiting. So she stays in that facility for 2 more years, from the time she's 16 to the time she's 18. She gets moved from being an inpatient to being like an outpatient, where her and Feather become roommates in basically like an on-campus type apartment, where they can come and go as they wish. They basically just have to I don't even know if they have to sign in and out anymore. They just come and go. As long as they show up for their therapy sessions and they show up for the things they need to show up for, then they can live a normal life. They can get a job, they can do, they can go out and explore the world and reacclimate to society. So her therapist has convinced her that she needs to start going out more. One day, Feather convinces her to go to the mall. While she's at the mall, she encounters a little shop that's like a high-end price gift shop, right? Inside the gift shop, she sees a series of prints, framed prints on the wall of woodland scenes. And inside the woods, there's just a random tree that's been decorated for Christmas. And at the base of the tree is a fox. And he's just sitting there looking at the tree. And she's mesmerized by these prints. And the sales clerk, obviously wanting to make a commission, comes up to her and is like, "Aren't these gorgeous?" Rumor has it that the forest Santa is that the forest Santa decorated the tree. Or she says something to that effect. And Holly's like, "Forest Santa?" And the clerk goes, "Oh, you must not be from around here. It's a local legend that the kids love. The forest Santa is a person who goes into the woods every year around Christmas, and he randomly decorates just random trees for Christmas time. And photographers and kids go out as groups looking for the trees to try and find the trees that he's decorated. And it's like almost like a scavenger hunt. And she's transfixed by this story. Obviously, she buys the prints. She takes them home and she hangs them up. And the next day, she's determined, I want to go look for one of these trees. She doesn't have a car. She doesn't have a driver's license. Her mother is very oppressive. Super oppressive. Her mother almost would prefer it if she stayed in the facility for the rest of her life and never got any type of freedom or went back out into the real world. And part of that could be just because she's terrified that something else might happen to her. But it comes across more as just controlling, and she just comes across as a very controlling bitch. So she doesn't have a driver's license. So she calls a cab, and it's a cabbie that's a woman. And she pays the cabbie to take her to roughly the area of woods where the clerk told her the photographs were taken. And she pays her extra to wait there for her to come back out, which she does. And she goes traipsing through the woods looking for one of these trees. Because Holly is obsessed with Christmas. She loves Christmas. She was born on Christmas Day. So she goes out looking for one of these trees. And she finds one. And from behind the tree, as she's standing there a little distance away, from behind the tree steps a man in flannel wearing a Santa hat. And he's singing to himself a Christmas carol, but he's botching it. He's replacing words with like curse words, and he's doing a terrible rendition of Jingle Bells. And she's like, oh my God, I think it's the forest Santa. She's thinking it to herself. She sees him, he does not see her. And she's a little bit scared because, she's been through a bunch of shit. She doesn't want to make her presence known. She doesn't know who this guy is. Until from around the tree pops a white dog. And she looks at the dog and she knows that it's her dog from the hole. And she wants so badly to say something, but she doesn't. She knows the general area. The man walks off, and she comes back the next day and finds his cabin and basically like knocks on his door and says, hi, you have my dog. He has long hair. He uses the hair to hide the half of his face that's burned. He doesn't think any woman could ever accept him or love him based on the way he looks, because of his rejection, the rejection he got from his girlfriend after it happened. But she doesn't see that. She doesn't see any of that. When she looks at him, all she sees are his eyes. And his eyes they're blue. They're the same color as the sky that she never got to see when she was in the hole. It's the way Carian put it. which I thought was very poetic. And so he doesn't speak, but he kind of grunts his way through a conversation. And she says, "Can I have my dog back?" And, he kind of sloughs it off like it's no big deal, like, whatever, I don't care. And towards the end of the conversation, he hands her a piece of paper with like a note written on it. And the note means so much to her because it's the written word, and her life is about books. She loves her fairy tales. She loves the written word. So him giving her something in writing, almost like a letter, means way more to her than if he had spoken. So she takes it, and she takes the dog, and she leaves. She goes back to the facility where Feather tells her that she's not going to be able to keep the dog. The facility has a no pet policy. She falls apart. She has no choice the next day but to return the dog. She has no choice but to take Poppy, who's the dog, to take Poppy back to Tyler. He takes the dog, and then she kind of inserts herself into his life by showing up every day after that to spend time with Poppy. Her brother and his fiance are planning on moving to New York soon, within the next couple of months. He has asked her to go with them and live with them, to give her a fresh start, because the entire town knows her as the girl in the hole. And everywhere she goes, people look at her, people stare at her, people talk about her, people come up to her and approach her and bring up her traumatic past. And it's very anxiety inducing, and it's very, it bothers her. And she can barely stand to go out in public. She honestly, she would rather be a recluse, just like Tyler. She's perfectly content spending time alone. She does not like crowds. She does not like people. She got so used to being alone in the dark with no noise that now it's like sensory overload anytime she leaves the facility. So she starts making a habit of showing up to his place every day. She'll sit there and play with the dog while he works. And she'll just make a name chatter. And he'll listen. Sometimes he'll respond with a grunt, or after a few days, he responds by speaking to her, and she's elated. And then after a while, he starts speaking more and more and more, to the point where now he's using his voice to talk to her every day. And his voice that was rusty and sounded terrible to his ears, she seems to adore. She never flinches away from him. She never flinches away from his face. When he makes eye contact with her, he's so used to people immediately breaking contact. She doesn't. He's so used to, when he speaks, people flinching, because his voice is very gravelly and very husky. She doesn't seem to mind at all. Over the course of the book, they develop feelings for each other. Both of them have a lot of issues, and it's like a minefield to get through those issues. He has issues with his family that have to be resolved because of what happened with his dad and the fact that he's basically cut himself off from his family. Now they're on a clock with her because she's supposed to be moving away. And he knows that he's not going to travel to New York every time he wants to see her, which is now getting to the point where he wants to see her every day. He goes out of his way to do things for her, which no one has ever done. They start spending literally every day together. And she starts to build her self-confidence. She starts to build just like a sense of normalcy. She feels safe with him. Everybody else around them tells her, you should stay away from him. He's weird. He's dangerous. He's unhinged. He has anger problems. He has whatever, which is true. He does have anger problems, but he has anger problems because of what happened to him as a teenager. But they bond over their mutual pain and anguish. But at the same time, they're pulling each other out and helping each other to heal and to grow and to just reconcile themselves with their pasts. So one day they're in his home and they're sitting there, and she says to him, I've seen a man. Oh, I've seen someone get burned before by a fire. I don't know what happened to him. I hope he's okay. And Tyler's like, what do you mean? And she says, when the bad man took me, I was in a van and I got out. I managed to escape and I ran through the woods and I came up on a party and there were two teenagers standing next to a bonfire. And I asked them for help. I begged them for help. The girl wouldn't help me. She laughed at me and turned her head away. But the boy, he bent down and started talking to me. And I tried to tell him that someone had taken me and he was going to help me. But then the bad man came and he pushed the boy into the fire and then took me back to the van. And as she's telling him this, his blood runs cold because he knows that that boy was him. He doesn't have those memories because they've been repressed since he came out of the fire. He didn't remember her. But when he met her and they made that first eye contact in the hole, he had a sense of familiarity, like he had seen her somewhere before, but he didn't know where. And now it all makes sense. And he has like a little meltdown. And he tells her she needs to go home. He forgot he has to be somewhere. He has to leave. And he storms out of the house. And he drives off. And she leaves because by this time, he has helped her get her license and he's bought her a car. Just like a little beat up like compact car that she can drive. So to give her a sense of independence away from her parents. So she leaves, but then she doesn't want to go back to the facility, and she doesn't want to go to her parents' house. So eventually she ends up back at the house where he eventually shows up. He tells her in a drunken stupor, because he went out drinking. He tells her, I was the boy in the fire. And she's devastated. Now she knows. In her mind, she's telling herself, if I hadn't run to him for help, he never would have been burned. And his life never would have been the way that it's been. I ruined his life. He consoles her and tells her, no, he doesn't see it that way at all. They have like a little intimate moment. And then later on, she catches him coming out of the bathroom after taking a shower with his scars on full display. And this is the point where they have their come to Jesus moment, where he shows her all of his scars and she shows him all of her scars. He has showed her all of his burn scars. She's felt them with her hands because he's heavily tattooed. The tattoos are to hide his burns. Obviously not on his face, but the rest of his body. And what she hasn't seen, she can feel beneath the ink. She has cigarette burns on her arms and things where the bad man put cigarettes out on her. She has cut marks on her lower stomach, right above her pubic bone, where he carved the word mine into her flesh. And that's those scars will stay with her forever. And she's deeply ashamed of those scars, but she shows them to him. Shortly after this, they tell each other, they do their I love yous. And it's such a, it's such a poignant moment. I was literally moved to I was literally almost moved to tears. I was like, oh my God. Now, there's still the issue, however, of her move to New York. Her brother's leaving in 2 months. They decide they're going to spend the next 2 months together. So they do. They spend the next 2 months together. At the end of that 2 months, as the date is looming, he gets scared. He wants her to stay. He doesn't want her to leave, but he doesn't know how to tell her to stay because he also wants her to have a life. He knows she's never lived a life. She's never had anything of her own. He doesn't want her to have to stay in a town that only knows her as the girl in the hole. He doesn't want her to have to live as a recluse the way that he lives, if that's not what she wants. He wants her to experience things. She, on the other hand, she wants to stay with him. He's her prince. She's just waiting for him to tell her that he wants her to stay. So he breaks and he goes to talk to his brother Tanner. Tanner, they have like a little heart-to-heart, and Tanner basically tells him, tell her, do what you have to do. So he goes to his tattoo artist, Lucas. And he says, hey, like, can you do me a favor? I'd like for you to draw but a couple of sketches for me. And Lucas is like, yeah, sure, man, for you, whatever. And he does. And Tyler puts together a book, which he delivers to her house, or to her apartment. And she opens the gift that's left on her doorstep, basically. And it's a bound fairy tale novel. It's a fairy tale book. And inside, it's the story of them. It's her and him and the fox from the print that he had domesticated and was essentially their pet, and Poppy the white dog. And it is essentially a handful of sketches that shows how they started, them walking through the woods, having a picnic, this and that. And it goes through and shows different scenes. And then the last scene in the book is him down on one knee, holding a ring and proposing to her. And she knows, I have to see him. She runs to the door, she opens it, and he's outside, waiting for her. And he proposes to her, and he says, when you're ready, I want you to be my wife. And he has a ring that he's made out of, if you remember anything from the first book, you'll remember that Tor had a tradition that they carried down from their father and their father's father, et cetera, about saving your change. And you would save your change, you'd put it in a jar, and over time that change would build, and when you met the right woman, you would use that change, and whatever was in that jar would be what you would use to buy her engagement ring. Well, Tyler fucked up his tradition because he didn't save, because he didn't think any woman would ever want him. So he didn't have a lot of change in his jars. So what he did have, he basically crushed down and melted and soldered to make a ring for her that was like a leafy vines and a bird's nest with 3 robin's eggs inside. And that's her engagement ring. Because, you know, they live in the woods, in a cabin in the woods, like that's their fairy tale. And he proposes to her, and she says yes. And she's not going to New York. But in the story, right before the scene of him proposing, it showed them in front of a much larger cabin, not the one that he currently lives in. And then the next scene at the end, after he's proposed, has them walking towards that larger cabin with the 2 of them holding hands, and the fox and the dog, and et cetera, et cetera. And he tells her, I've bought another cabin, a much larger 2-story cabin that is in another town not far from here, where we can both make a fresh start, and we won't be who we were. We'll be new people, and we can still be us and have our fairy tale. and they lived happily ever after. So I'd like to say that's how the book ends, but, and this is where I'm going to yell at Carian. She decided to add a bonus scene at the end that was essentially written as if it was an obituary. And it essentially summed up the rest of their life together. They both die within a week of each other at the ages of like 80 something in the high 70s after a 5-year-long battle with cancer. They're survived by like one child and a slew of grandchildren or something. And the way she wrote it was so I made it through the entire book without crying. And then I got to the bonus scene. And I bawled like a baby. And you guys know me, I don't go out of my way to look for books that make my heart hurt. I actively avoid books that make my heart hurt. I know that scene was meant to be poignant. And you hear the acorns falling on the roof of my house? I know that scene was meant to be poignant and sweet, but it hurt. It hurt. I could have done without that, if I'm being honest. I want my fairy tale. I want they lived happily ever after. I don't want what's real. If it's too real, that the scene was too real. I don't want to know that they had cancer. I don't want to know when they died. I just want they lived happily ever after. That's it. Okay? Don't ever do that to me again. Now, moving on. So when I was listening to the audio for this, I'm going to be honest, I thought that the timeline was kind of skewed, and I'll tell you why. This book only has one true sex scene in it, and it's at the very end of the book. There are a few scenes that involve like oral sex, like him going down on her. And there's one like fade to black scene of her going down on him. But aside from that, when we're talking about like penetrative sex, one scene at the very end. So that was one thing that kind of threw me off. The other thing that threw me off was the timing of the I love yous. The timing of the I love yous felt very soon to me. And I think that was because of the lack of sex. Now, I'm used to couples having sex at least once before they come to the realization that they're in love. I think that's standard practice in almost every romance novel, right? Like you have sex and then over time you realize I'm in love with that person. At first you're just in lust with that person, right? In this book, no. In this book, he knew that he was in love with her long before. She knew she was in love with him from basically the time he pulled her out of the hole. Granted, it was a childlike love that grew into something stronger, but it was still there. So as I was listening to the audio, I kept thinking to myself, oh, I've still got plenty of time in this book. They haven't even had sex yet. I can't even be halfway through. They haven't had sex yet. And then I looked down and I had like an hour left in the book. And I was like, what? What the fuck? How's the book almost over? They haven't had sex yet. So it threw me off big time. However, that being said, I can understand why she wrote it that way, given the trauma that Holly went through and her need to work her way up to the intimacy that is involved with the act of sex. I can see why it took so long to put that scene in, if that makes sense. So once I rationalized that in my head, I wasn't upset anymore. It's okay. Are we here? So as long as you can get past the lack of actual sex until the very end, the story itself literally will make you feel. It took my heart away. Like, it literally ripped my heart out. The bonus scene killed me, but the story stole my heart. It will stay inside of me for a long time. So I don't want to cry again, fuck's sake. So anyways, for the rating for this book, I'm going to give it a 9.5 because I loved this book. I fucking loved it. I loved it so much. The characters, the backstory, the growth, the intimate moments that they shared. Holly was very childlike in a lot of ways, but she knew exactly what she wanted from the beginning. And she wasn't afraid to say, when the time came, when push came to shove, she wasn't afraid to say, no, this is what I want. And Tyler was a gruff, grumpy, mean dude. Crabby as fuck. But his heart was so big. And the protectiveness that he felt over her, it fucked me up so bad, y'all. Anyways, would I recommend this book to other people? Dear God, yes. Would I recommend this series to other people? Yes, absolutely. I give it a 9.5. I have nothing else to say. I thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like this channel, please feel free to subscribe. Yes. You can also follow me on social media. I will link them all in the description box below, and I'll put a little banner here on the screen for you guys to see. And I think that's it. I will see you guys in my next video. I love you so much. Thank you for watching. Bye. In today's video, kiddos, did I say that correctly? Sounded weird when anyways. In today's video, kiddos, we are going to be reviewing book 2 in Carian Cole's All Tied Up series, and it is called Tied. Is it called All Torn Up? All Torn Up? All Tied Up? No. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Stop the bus. I gotta check something. Okay, why are there so many extra pages in this fucking book? Ruthless, I already did that. Oh, it's all torn up. Candace, you dummy. All right, anyways. In today's video, did I get that right? Yes, I did. $4.99, okay. If you want the beautifully aesthetic cover, if you want this gorgeous paperback that I'm holding in my hands, freckles, I swear to God. Before I was even a quarter of the way.
Open this.
Charlotte! Terrible. Here. I can throw this in the trash over here. Okay. Close the door. Crazy. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Together we found love, happiness, and a closeness that once felt possible. Stop fucking up. Stop it. You know how to read. Or do you? Too much audio. You need to get back to reading regular books. Oh, God. I loved it so much. I loved it so much. Look. Look at them together. Aren't they beautiful? Technically, they should go like this. But aren't they beautiful? Torn is thicker. I just noticed that. I love it. I love it. I am so sad. This gnat is bothering the fuck out of me in here. I can't handle it. All right, I gotta go freshen up my eyeliner because I cried it off. I got teared up and I cried it off. So I gotta go freshen it up. I don't think there's gonna be that many bloopers in this video because I think I was pretty decent. It did go over an hour though, but that's okay because it was a good story. I told a good tale. I told a good tale. I'm a good teller. I'm a good story weaver, right? Now I have to backtrack because I was so excited to do Tide that I skipped Torn. And now I have to go back. Whoops. I love you so much. Okay. I'm gonna go. I love you so much. Bye-bye. Bye, y'all. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye now. I'll see you later. Bye.